Good morning, students. Welcome back to online class. Today we are going to study chapter 2, sexual reproduction in flowering plants, and the topic is pollination. What is pollination? Pollination is a transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma. There are two kinds of pollination. One is self-pollination and the other one is cross-pollination, or it is also known as xenogamy. Now let us talk about self-pollination. There are two types of self-pollination. Autogamy type of self-pollination. Autogamy type of self-pollination is a pollination where there is a transfer of pollen grain from anther to the stigma of the same flower. Yes, it is the transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma within the same flower. Examples are pea, wheat, rice, etc. Now, plants such as Viola, Oxalis, and Camelina produces two types of flowers. One is jasmogamous and the second one is cleistogamous. What is jasmogamous type of flower? In jasmogamous type of flowers, flowers are with exposed anthers and stigma. That means jasmogamous type of flower is a flower like normal flower that are opened and exposed anther and stigma. Let us go to cleistogamous flower. In cleistogamous flower, flowers never open to expose their sex organ. That means the flowers remain closed. They never open. Therefore, their sex organs are also closed, never exposed. These flowers are invariably autogamy. Since the flower is closed, there is no chance of cross-pollination. So obviously, the type of pollinations will be autogamy. Now this is the picture of Camelina plant. Okay, both are Camelina plant. Now look at the upper part of the plant. You see a flower, blue in color, light blue in color. This flower is jasmogamous flower. They are opened and the sex organs are exposed. But look down, close to the root, there are flowers, but these flowers doesn't open. Therefore, the sex organs that is present inside the flowers are also never exposed outside. Now let us go to second type of self-pollination, that is Gaetanogamy. Now in Gaetanogamy self-pollination, the pollen grain is transferred from one flower to another flower born on the same plant. Now look at the picture. There are three flowers here, A, B, and C. Okay, please ignore this C flower for a while. Look, concentrate on A and B. So in autogamy type of self-pollination, we said that pollen grain is transferred from anther to stigma within the same flower. Okay. So pollination in flower A will be an example of autogamy self-pollination. But look at the flower A and B. If the pollination is take place between flower A and B, different flowers but born on the same plant, so these pollinations is what we call Gaetanogamy type of self-pollination. Now let us go to cross-pollination or xenogamy. It is the transfer of pollen grains from one flower to stigma of genetically different flower. Okay, look here. If the pollination take place between flower A and C or flower B and C, then that pollination is called cross-pollination, because the pollination is taking place from one flower to another flower that are genetically different from each other. This process is brought about by the help of external agencies such as wind, water, animals, insects, birds, etc. Now let us go to details of different agencies helping in cross-pollination. Number one is anemophily, wind pollination. If the plant is pollinated by wind, then we call that plant as anemophilous. Now anemophilous have the following characters, okay, to facilitate wind pollination. Number one is flowers are inconspicuous and not showy. Means the flowers, okay, are not noticeable, okay, not that noticeable to the eyes of pollinators. Flowers are devoid of scent, nectar, etc. Okay, the flowers doesn't have smell or nectar. The flowers produce a very large quantity of dusty pollens. Okay, flowers produce a large quantity of pollen grains. Okay, since pollination is carried out by non-living agent, okay, pollen falling into the stigma is just by a chance. Okay, here many pollens may get lost on the process. So to compensate for that, a large quantity of pollen is produced. Let's take an example. A single flower of cannabis, just one flower of cannabis produces over 5 lakhs pollen grains. The pollen grains are dry and unwettable. The pollen grains produced by anemophilous plants are usually dry. Okay. They are usually dry so that, okay, they facilitate wind pollination. If the pollen grains are wet, then it will be difficult to fly with the current of wind. In plants like grass and wheat, anthers are versatile. Okay, in plants like grass and wheat, the types of anther are versatile. Okay, so that they can freely swing with a light breeze and facilitate wind pollination. Here the stigma becomes sticky, hairy, feathery or brown so that they can't catch the pollination easily. Flowers often have a single ovule in each ovary and the numerous flowers pack into inflorescence. Now maize, rice, sawtooth oak, pine, these are some of the plants, okay, that pollinate by wind. Pine is usually not an angiosperm, it is a gymnosperm, but I included, okay, among this example because the pictures show a clear pollinations of pollen by wind. Now the second agent is water, hydrophily. Pollination by water is quite rare in flowering plant and it is limited to about 30 genera and mostly monocotyledons plant. In majority of aquatic plants such as water hyacinth and water lily, since the flowers emerge above the level of water, so the pollination is carried out by insects or wind. But in aquatic plant like Vallisneira, the female flower reaches the surface of water by a long stalk. You can see the picture here. Okay, this is the stigma, and the stigma can reach the water surface by a long stalk, and the pollen grains are released on the water. Okay, and these pollen grains are passively carried by water current until they reach the stigma. Aquatic plants like sea grasses, female flowers remain submerged in water and the pollen are released inside the water. Okay, so in plant like sea grasses, there is no chance for insect or wind to pollinate because the flower is submerged inside and pollen grain is released inside the water. Here the only pollinators is water. In most of the water pollinated species, pollen grains are protected from wetting by a mucilaginous covering. Now the third one is entomophily, insect pollinated flowers. Those insect pollinated flowers are called entomophilous. They have the following characters. Flowers are large, colorful, fragrant, and rich in nectars. Flowers are large so that they can be easily noticed by the insect. Colorful to attract, fragrance and rich in nectar. This is also to attract the insect to the flower. When flowers are small, in case if the flowers are small, then these small flowers get clustered together into fluorescence so that they become conspicuous or noticeable to the pollinators. In viola, that is pansy, a marking is there on the petals, and this marking on petal is called nectar guide, and this marking will guide the insect to the nectaries. Animals are attracted to flowers by colors or fragrance. Okay. Nectar and pollen are the usual rewards provided to the animals by the flower. The body of the animals are coated with pollen grains through which it comes in contact with stigma, and this is how pollination is brought about in flower. In some species, floral rewards are in providing safe place to lay egg. Okay, in some flower, okay, the reward may be nectar or pollen. Okay, but in some flower, the reward may be providing safe place to lay eggs. Let's take an example. Yucca plant. In yucca plant, moth lay eggs in the locule of the ovary. So the ovary become a safe place for the moth to lay the eggs. And in return, okay, they will bring pollination to the flowers. So pansy, China rose, yucca, salvia are some of the examples of entomophilous plants. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.